Okay, in this lecture we're going to be talking about Module 10, which is entitled Basic Router Configuration. First thing we'll talk about is, as far as this module, why should you take it? Well, we're going to learn about basic router configurations and some of the associated iOS commands to do that. In particular, we'll be learning about what they're calling initial router settings. This will be things such as the name of the router or the device, various passwords that the device may have. We'll talk about configuring interfaces. These will be IP address and subnet mask. And then we'll talk about configuring the default gateway. So here are some first steps that you do when you're configuring a router. Here we're in global config mode, and we will have the host name command. We'll talk about setting the password to get into privileged exec mode, which is enable secret. To secure user exec mode, we can go in and set the console to have a password that will require us to do that even just to get to user exec mode. We also can set passwords on virtual terminals. This would be used for telnetting or secure shelling SSH into the device. If we use the service password encryption command, this encrypts all the passwords. Where this is important is if you do a show running config and you do not do the service password encryption, the passwords will show up in plain text. So if you want those to be encrypted in the running config file or the startup config file, you need to turn on service encryption. Also, we'll talk about the message of the day banner. This allows you, when somebody accesses your router, to display messages to them. We can type in to end the configuration, and then we can copy the running config to the startup config. So the running config is what's in memory on the device. The startup config is stored in a file, and when the device starts up, of course, you read the startup config. So if you reconfigure your router, you have it working the way you would like, you want to copy the running config to the startup config. So if the device is power cycled or rebooted, it has those configuration changes. So here is an example. They're showing you the topology. They've highlighted router 1 to show that we're on router 1. The prompt is router. We go to enable. At this point there's no password, so we go straight from user exec mode to privileged exec mode. We issue the configure terminal command to get into global config mode, and then once we're in global config mode, we can use the hostname command to change it from the default of router to R1 to match up with the topology diagram up here. So notice here we stay in global config mode, but the name of the router has changed. The enable secret, to use the enable command to get from user exec mode to privileged exec mode, is class. The console password is Cisco. We set the virtual terminals 0 through 4 to have the password Cisco. We allow SSH or telnet access to the virtual terminals to the device, and then we issue the service password encryption command to encrypt the passwords in our running config. Again, message of the day, this is something from Unix. When you logged into a Unix machine, you got a file displayed that was called the message of the day. We can do the same thing on the router. Here they're putting a message that says unauthorized access is prohibited. Another common one is by logging into this device, you are agreeing to be monitored. Different things like that. If you're not an employee of company X, you should not be on this device. And then they copy the running config to the startup config. This is a syntax checker exercise where it will tell you what it wants you to do. and see if you can enter the appropriate iOS commands to accomplish that. If you need a little help, there's the Show Me button. 10.1.4 is a packet tracer on configuring initial router configurations. I am going to assign that so that you can practice these commands in packet tracer as well. So that covers what they're calling initial router configurations. We will move on now to talk about configuring interfaces on the router. So here, these interfaces will be where we plug things in. We've talked about this in the past. They can be physical interfaces or they can be virtual interfaces, such as the VLAN 1 interface. So they're saying on this device we have two gigabit Ethernet interfaces, G000 and G001. So what they're showing us here first is what commands we're going to learn about. So we choose our interface with the interface command. We can give a description of the interface. We can set the IP version 4 address and or the IP version 6. And then one of my least favorite iOS commands is to bring an interface up. You say no shutdown. So the command is actually shutdown to shut down an interface, and if you want to do the opposite of that, you put no in front of it. So just like previously, we have this topology. We're on router 1. We go into enable mode or privileged exec mode, whichever you want to call it. There we go into global configuration mode, and then we say we're going to set interface G000. So this is the interface over here for this network to the left of router 1. The description is this is the link to get to the LAN. The IP address of that is 192.168.10.1. We haven't talked a whole lot about subnet masks, but we should start talking about that in Module 11. The subnet mask is 255.255.255.0. We set the IP version 6 address, and then we bring the interface up with the no shutdown command, and then we say exit, go back to global config mode, and notice we get some messages here that interfaces are changing state. So these 4 lines here are a result of us bringing the interface up. Likewise, on the next interface, gig 001, the description is this is the link to get to R2. So it's explaining this link here. The IP address here is 209.165.200.225. The subnet mask is 255.255.255.252. Here is the IP version 6 address. We issue the no shutdown command to bring up interface G001. And here are the messages we saw just like before, telling us that the interface is coming up and becoming functional. The next section is about verifying interface configuration. The way we can do that is show IP interface brief. It will give us the interface name, it will tell us the IP address, and it will tell us whether it is up and whether the protocol's running on it correctly. Likewise, we have a show IP v6 interface brief, which will show us the information about the IP version 6 interfaces. So here are some commands for verifying them. We just saw show IP interface brief. Will show us that. Show IP version 6 brief, we saw that as well. I think we saw this in a previous module, which is show IP route. That will show us the routing tables for IP version 4. If we say show IPv6 route, it's going to give us the routing tables for the IP version 6 protocol. There is a show interfaces command that if we say show interfaces and give it an interface, it tells us a lot of information about what's going on, how many packets have been sent, how long it's been up, what's the MAC address, what's its description, what are the reliabilities, what's the transmit load, the receive load, etc. Lots of things that we'll talk about typically in Cisco 3, where you're learning about routing protocols. You have a show IPv6, show IP interfaces. This will tell you, like, here's gig 000, and it will tell us what's going on with the interface we listed, and likewise you have a show IPv6 interfaces. This section ends with a syntax checker to make sure that you understand the commands that you were shown in this section. So we'll move on to default gateway. So as we've talked about a number of times, if hosts are talking to other hosts on the same network or the same LAN, they do that by MAC address. If you're going to communicate with a host that's outside the network, you are going to need to talk by IP address. If you need to talk to the outside world, you're going to do that through a router, and the interface of the router that's in your network will be the default gateway to send that. So here in this figure we show PC1's talking to PC2, and it does not have to leave the network. The network cloud not shown would be where I'm moving my mouse right now, including G000 of the router. So here's one network cloud, and then down here we have another network cloud. This is the 192.168.10.0 network. The network down here in this cloud is the 192.168.11.0 network. So if PC1 needs to talk to PC2, it does that on the local network, like I said, using MAC addresses. Down here, PC1 needs to talk to PC3. PC3 is in a different network, so what will happen is it will send the packet to the default gateway, which will then have a routing table that says, oh, if you're trying to reach the 11 subnet, you need to go out the gig 001 interface. So that is the default gateway on a PC. On a switch, it's the same thing. If it needs to talk to a device that's on the outside world, it is going to do that by talking to the router, and typically that will be VLAN 1. Okay, so here's a syntax checker exercise to go through and make sure you understand how to configure the default gateway, in this case on a switch. 10.3.4 is a packet tracer exercise, which I do plan to assign, called connect a router to a LAN. So it'll have you go through and configure that router, and then verify it, and then use ping to check end-to-end connectivity. .10.3.5 is a packet tracer on default gateway issues. It's relatively short. I do plan to assign that, so watch for that to appear in Blackboard. And we will move on to the module practice and quizzes. The first thing we have is a video talking about network device differences. It's about 4.5 minutes. I do plan to play it right now in your lecture.
Hello everyone, we are here to talk about the Cisco routers and switches that you may find in a classroom near you. Now more specifically, we're going to focus on the Cisco 4000 series router and the Cisco 2960 series switches. With that in regard, the Cisco Netiquette curriculum is utilizing the exact 4221 model Cisco router and the 2960 Plus series switch. We're going to take a look at a couple different network devices because what you may have in your classroom, it might be different. So let's talk about the interfaces and the different expansion slots that you may find on a Cisco router near you. The first router we'll take a look at is the Cisco 4000 series router. And this router right here is actually a 4321 router, which is different than the 4221 router. But let's take a look at what is equipped on this Cisco router. We've got what are called our integrated ports. That would be our gigabit interface 001 and our gigabit interface 000. We'll take a closer look in a second, but those ports are built into the Cisco router. On the right side here, we have these NIM slots. That's network interface module slots. These are expansion cards that we install on our router. This card allows us to have serial cables plugged in using serial interfaces. Now, for a closer look at this router, we can blow up this picture and say, there's a gigabit 000 that's shared. There's a yellow line that connects two ports, and that is correct. This gigabit Ethernet 000 interface actually allows us to either use the integrated copper network interface connection or our SFP, where SFP stands for small form factor pluggable. That is a module that allows us to plug in a fiber transceiver in this example. And even on the right side, there's a closer view here of our network interface modular slot, which is our expansion slot with those serial cables plugged in. That being serial 0, for example, on the NIM card slot. Continuing onwards, we'll take a look at a Cisco 2900 series router, and this is a big, beefy 2-rack unit router. It's 2 rack units high if you take a look at the height of this thing. We see that we have our WIC card slots, just like we saw with a network interface module in the last router. WIC stands for WAN interface card. These are WICs, which means enhanced high-speed WAN interface card slots. I've got 2 of these WIC2Ts, which are WAN interface cards using serial cables connected. Then on the right side here, what we'll see with this 2900 series router is I've got multiple integrated gigabit Ethernet ports. I've got gigabit Ethernet 00 and 02. Then down below here, we've got gigabit Ethernet 01. And again, this yellow line down here is showing that we are sharing the SFP transceiver port with the Gig 02 copper Ethernet port. When one's in use, the other can't be used. So this is allowing us right now to have a fiber connection, which can literally be an uplink to another device. Let's take a closer look at that. You'll see the Gig 00, Gig 02 with our copper Ethernet plugged in. You'll see that Gig Ethernet 01, which is that shared port for that copper, as well as that SFP transceiver. And there on the left side, we see that enhanced high-speed WAN interface card known as the WIC. And that is where we have our serial 0 and our serial 1 cable plugged in accordingly. Now, this router is the Cisco 1900. You may see this one in your topology with what you have. And with this, we have, again, our enhanced high-speed WIC slots. This has less space than what we saw in the previous router. And also, we only have 2 of our integrated gigabit Ethernet ports. For a closer look on that right side of the router, you can see the gigabit Ethernet 00, the Gig Ethernet 0/1, as well as our enhanced high-speed WAN interface card with our serial cables plugged in. Serial 0 being the bottom one, and serial 1 being the top port. So regardless of what you have inside of your area with your network equipment, we're going to try to focus on the Cisco 4000 series as well as the Cisco 2960 series being the equipment of choice. But keep in mind that classrooms may vary, and it's important that you understand the equipment that you will be utilizing. So get started, take a look at your equipment, and let's make the best of using Cisco routers and switches in the classroom.
Okay, I think this part 1 video you just watched and the part 2 video that I'm getting ready to play are very important in an online class, because if we were to be meeting in person, we would be doing some hands-on labs and interacting with actual physical equipment. So like I said, these videos do a pretty good job of showing these devices to you. This next video, part 2, is a tad longer than what I typically play. It's 10 minutes, 15 seconds, but like I said, I think it does a really good job of showing you about the equipment that you might have if you were working in a network environment.
Hello everyone, this is part 2 of our network device overview, and here we're going to focus on the configuration of a variety of routers. Now the Cisco routers we're talking about here are going to be the Cisco 4000 series, 2900 series, and the 1900 series routers. Now, CCNA version 7 labs were built and designed using the 4221 Cisco router and the 2960 Plus switch. Here we're going to talk about the variety of Cisco routers that you may find in a classroom because the equipment you have might vary. So let's get started, and we're going to hit router 1 first, which is the 4000 series router. In our topology, we've got a gig 001 interface going down to a PC. We've got the gigabit 000 interface using a SFP small form factor pluggable fiber transceiver. We've got the serial 010, which is utilizing a NIM, the Network Interface Module expansion slot with a serial card installed. So let's get started inside of the operating system and take a look at these interfaces using some show commands. The first show command to know is going to be our show IP interface brief. And with this modifier of brief, we'll get an easy yet very, very beautiful output for our interfaces that we have deployed. On this 4000 series router, we've got gigabit Ethernet 000 as it's displayed in the topology. We've got gigabit Ethernet 001, which is also displayed in the topology, connecting down to PC1. We've got serial 010, which is using our network interface module expansion slot, which has a serial card installed. Also, we've got serial 011, which is not in use, and then there's a gigabit Ethernet 0 as well. Well, let's take a closer look at this gigabit 000. And to do this, we'll use the command show interface, followed by that exact port, which is gigabit Ethernet 000. And when I hit enter, I want to show you something that's very important here. This is going to be a fiber connection. But how can we see that on the router? Well, inside of the output for our show interface gigabit Ethernet 000, we can look for something called media type. And here on this line, we'll be able to see that we're running full duplex 1 gigabit connectivity, and media type is SX. This is very different than taking a look at an RJ45 copper Ethernet connection. We can compare this gigabit Ethernet 000 port to the gigabit Ethernet 001. Let's do that next. I'll do another show command, and this will be show interface, followed by gigabit Ethernet 00/1. And let's take a look at the media type of this port. We see the line full duplex again, we see a speed, and then at the end of that we see media type is RJ45. This means that we're talking copper Ethernet connectivity as compared on the last port, which is SX, which is using a fiber transceiver. Awesome. So for us at this time, we should do a small configuration to have these ports up and running, both with IP addressing and activated. To do that, let's play with the fiber port and go from there. I'm going to enter my global configuration mode because this is where I make changes on the router. And to do that, that's the command config space T. Now, config space T doesn't do anything until I hit the enter key. So I'll hit enter, and you'll see my prompt change to my global configuration mode. Now in this mode, I can use my command interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0/0, and once I hit enter, I'm now configuring that fiber transceiver. For me, I'll put an IP address on. We'll make this easy. How about a 10.0.0.1? And I'll give myself a subnet mask, ending with a 252. You can see that I shortened the word address to just add, and it'll take this command just fine here. When I hit enter, the IP address is applied, and I'll use the command no shutdown to bring this fiber transceiver up. Interface gigabit 000 is now configured, so let's head over to the 2900 series router and take a look at bringing this fiber link up on the other side. And what we're going to notice is those port identifiers, they're rather different. So here on the 2900 series router, we're going to start just like we did on the 4000. Let's use a popular show command, and that's show IP interface followed by the modifier brief. And with this, we'll be able to see all the ports on our router and their corresponding interface identifiers. For example, we've got 3 gigabit Ethernet ports on this 2900 series box. And we have gigabit Ethernet 00, 01, and 02. This is very different than what we saw in the 4000 series, which was gigabit Ethernet 001 and 000. So keep in mind these interface identifiers are going to change based off of the model of your device that you're using. Also, they'll change based off of your expansion slots. For example, on this 2900 series router, it's not shown in the picture, but there are 4 serial ports available on this box using the enhanced high-speed WAN interface cards. So for us, let's focus on that gigabit Ethernet 0/1. I'm going to go into my global configuration mode. Again, this is where we're able to make our changes on our router. And with that config T command, hitting enter, we have moved into the configuration mode. Now I can go into that interface with the command interface gigabit Ethernet 0/1. When I click enter, we are now in our config if mode for that port. We're going to configure this thing. I will put an IP address of 10.0.0.2 because the other side was .1. And again, the corresponding subnet mask. Now we need to bring this port online, so we'll use our no shutdown command, and I'll hit enter, and we'll get some status changes that are going to occur here. Our gig 01 is coming up. There it is. And we'd like to verify the media type of this interface, just like we've done on the other side. So I'm going to type in end. That'll take me back to my privilege exec mode, that pound sign we see there. And I'll use my show interface, followed by gigabit Ethernet 0/1. That's a verify this. And what we're looking for here is going to be media type. And if I scroll through this, we'll see that we've got full duplex. All right, that's great. 1 gig per second speed, that's awesome. And there it is. Media type is SX. This is different compared to RJ45 that we saw previously on the 4000 series gig 001 port. So let's go into our gig 02 interface on the 2900 series and finish our deployment, and then hop into the 1900 series. I'm going to go back into my configuration mode, which is using config T. I'm going to go into my interface, followed by gigabit Ethernet E02. Awesome. And now in gigabit Ethernet 0/2, this is the port on the right side of the 2900. I'm going to put an IP address here. And for this, we'll do IP address, followed by a 172.16.0.1, and same subnet mask as before. To bring this interface online, we'll use our no shutdown command. And now this port is also configured. So let's take a look at our third router, which is going to be our 1900 series, and do some configuration over there. On our 1900 series router, we're going to start it just like we've done before, a show IP interface brief command. From here, we can see our port identifiers. They're very similar to the 2900 series, gigabit Ethernet 00 and 01. You notice we actually have less ports here on the 1900 series. It is a different model than the 2900, and it's a little bit smaller. So we've got 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, as well as I have an expansion slot in use with that high-speed WIC card slot, and that's for those serial lines. We're going to use the gigabit 01, which connects us over to the 2900 series. So we're going to enter our configuration mode with config T, and then we'll go into our interface, followed by gigabit Ethernet 0/1. Inside of here, we'll finish our addressing with an IP address 172.16.0.2, because the other side was 1. And we'll use our subnet mask of all 255s ending with a 252. We need to make sure this interface is activated, so we'll use our no shutdown command, and we'll get some status messages populating here. When everything is up on our side of the house, we'll do some ping tests and make sure we have connectivity to the other side. To do those ping tests, I'll type in end, and now we can ping 172.16.0.1, which is gig 02 on the 2900 series router. First one might fail due to ARP, the last are successful. We can run that command again and see a full 100% success. To close it out, let's ping across that fiber link as well. Let's go back to the 2900 series and make sure we have full connectivity to the 4000 series on that fiber connection. So back on that R2 router, we're going to ping across that gig 01, and that's us having verify the IP address before we say it. Show IP interface brief. That's us having the 10.0.0.2 IP address on our side, and we're going to ping the other side, which is 10.0.0.1. And ping is an awesome network testing tool. This is how we can test our network connectivity between devices. When I hit enter, I want 5 success, but we might have 4 only because of ARP. So ARP has successfully resolved, and we're going to fire that off again, and now we should have 5 pinging across that fiber link. So take the time to practice with the Cisco network equipment that you might have on hand at your location. While we encourage the use of the 4221 router and the 2960 switch, classroom equipment might vary. But we encourage you to use your show commands and get comfortable regardless of the model of the equipment that you're working on.
Okay, 10.4.3 is a packet tracer entitled Basic Device Configuration. You're going to be doing things similar to what you just saw in the part 2 video. So I do plan to assign that, so watch for that to appear in Blackboard. 10.4.4 is a lab building a switch and router network. We probably will not do this lab. If we do, we may do it in the net lab, but I have a feeling we won't do it at all. But you should read through it and just make sure you understand what they're getting at, or what you would be doing were we to be in an in-person class and actually doing this lab. So 10.4.5, what did I learn in this module? You can read this, but it reviews the basic configuration commands that we went through. And then finally, 10.4.6 is your module quiz, which you can do on your own. So that finishes up Module 10. Our next module group exam is over Modules 8, 9, and 10. So watch for information regarding that module group exam to be emailed to you and probably appear in Blackboard information as well.